This conference will now be recorded.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Bob Ghetto, and I'm the current chairman of the Board of Equalization. I would like to go ahead and call this meeting to order. We're going to use the official time as about 1:34. We have everyone in attendance except our member Alan Colt, who we think is going to be dialing in here very, very soon. With that being said, I want to go ahead and take a look at our agenda, and I think the first thing we're going to do is do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All righty. Now is our point in time where we want to have our public comment. For anybody in the room who wants to talk about anything in particular, now is the time to do that.
I see that Alan has joined us. Alan, can you hear us? No, I guess that wasn't him.
Okay. Hearing no public comment, I'd now like to move to item 4, verification and posting of the agenda. Has that been taken care of?
Pam Moore, for the record, the agenda was posted on January 21st between the hours of 1 and 5 at the locations listed on the agenda in accordance with statutes.
Okay. Next, consideration, possible action regarding the approval of the agenda as submitted or revised.
Mr. Chairman, Tom Riggins, for the record, I move we accept the agenda as provided.
Okay. Looking for a second.
Seconded.
We have a second from Member Bernie. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, we are now down to our item 6, which is our annual training workshop. And I do appreciate everybody taking the time to do this. The reason I'm in favor of this annual training is because we meet so infrequently. Sometimes I think I forget from year to year. So I do appreciate everybody taking the time this afternoon to join us in this training. We're going to go ahead and start with item A, and this is going to be conducted by the Nevada Department of Taxation. And please join us, introduce yourself, and we're sure glad you're here.
There we go. You think I would figure this out after a while. Thank you for welcoming me. My name's Jeff Mitchell. I work at the Department of Taxation. I've been there approximately a long time, 13 years now. And I've been in my current role for 8, of which I've enjoyed working with the assessors throughout the state. And I enjoyed actually this a great deal, coming out and visiting with you. I believe I've come a couple of times. I probably need to change the format of my presentation just to mix it up. So if you invite me back next year, the bubbles will be gone. We'll do something a little bit more aesthetically different, but the content will probably be the same. If there's any general questions, please feel free to interrupt me at any time. I do not mind that at all. In fact, I prefer it. My voice can get a little monotonous. So I welcome that at any time. And with that, with your permission, Chair, I'll just kind of begin. Wonderful. So I provided a couple of different documentation. One is this PowerPoint, and the other one is a manual referred to as the Nevada Property Tax Elements and Applications. That's an annual manual that we prepare at the Department of Taxation. That provides different dates of the different rolls that are entered and closed, the different valuation methodologies in the state. It's about a 50 to 60 page manual that has a lot of great information in there. It has the history of property tax within the state of Nevada and kind of where taxation has evolved over the years and what it's become. Property tax in the state of Nevada is one of its oldest taxes. It was established about the same time as the net proceeds of minerals, which is a tax in lieu of a property tax upon the mineral estate of the land. So they're cousins, they speak the same language, but it's kind of a different dialect. I won't talk about net proceeds too much, unless you guys want me to. So some important dates. These are when appeals must be received on the different valuations. January 15th is probably the most important date for the County Board of Equalization. That's when the current secured roll and any valuation that was placed on the unsecured roll up until December 15th may be appealed to the County Board of Equalization. So those are the appeals that you will hear in front of the County Board when they're filed. The County Board meets after the clerk receives notification that the assessment roll has been completed, and the last day of County Board must be concluded in February. And the reason for that February date is because budgets and the budgetary process begins in earnest at the end of February. The county assessor, in one of the state's more annoying reports that we require from him, is called the segregation of the roll. And that's filed twice, once at the end of January, January 31st, where they have to segregate out the assessed value for all the different taxing districts within the county. And then they, again, after the county board closes, have to file that again by March 5th to the state. And so those assessed values that we received are used to set tax rates, used to set the revenue amounts that the county and the different entities within the county use to budget. Some other important dates, the State Board of Equalization. If there's appeals from the County Board of Equalization, where the taxpayer or the county assessor both have the right to appeal the decisions that you make. And those appeals flow up to the State Board of Equalization, which is a 5-member board appointed by the governor, composing of a variety of different specialties, CPAs, appraisers, representatives of business, and so forth. Those appeals must be received by March 10th of each year. One other valuation that the county assessor may do is if they place property on the unsecured roll after December 15th, which they are allowed to do up until April 30th, those two can be appealed to the State Board of Equalization. And so if those are placed on after December 15th, again, that date to appeal is March 10th. And then they also, if a value is placed between March and May 1st, July 1st is the appeal deadline on those. Mine property is a direct appeal to the State Board of Equalization, and those must be filed by January 15th. That reverts back to that January 15th deadline. There's also property that is valued by the Department of Taxation. These tend to be utilities, airlines, railroads, power lines, so forth. Those appeals also must be filed by January 15th. Powers of the County Board of Equalization. You have the power to determine valuation of any real or personal property placed on the secured or unsecured rolls of the county. And you may change and correct any valuation found to be incorrect unless the owner has refused entry or refused access, I apologize, to the county assessor. The applicable NRSs, 361, 345, just kind of goes over the things that we just talked about. So the different types of appeals that you'll see and that come up to the County Board of Equalization will fall within one of these categories. Equalization or determination of that value. We'll go over that a little bit more in a minute. I talked a little bit already about the authority of the county board and the exceptions of the county board. Again, property placed on the roll between December 15th and May 1st, the authority to change those values reside with the state board, as well as any secured property not assessed by the county assessor, utilities, mine property, net proceeds, and minerals. There's 3 types of appeals that generally you'll see. The first 2 bullet points there have to deal with equity. If they believe that their property is overvalued because similarly situated properties are undervalued, that is an equalization matter that comes in front of the county board. Or if inequity exists because property is valued higher than similarly situated properties. And the third is if full cash value of property is less than its taxable value. Third one's fairly simple to understand. What would it sell for between a common and a well-informed buyer and seller versus that taxable value. The first 2, the inequity, those are a little bit more amoebus, for lack of a better term, in concepts, because equity can be quite hard to determine. I also get ahead of myself in the slide a little bit. There's the definition of full cash value. I don't need to read it. Some tools that are available if you have an equity appeal that comes in front of you. One of the duties of the Department of Taxation is that we have to annually conduct what's referred to as a ratio study. In that ratio study, we come out and we visit each county assessor office on a rotating basis once every 3 years. And we basically perform 2 different functions in that ratio study. One is a performance audit, where we make sure that they have the policies, procedures, and so forth that follow the law. And the second functionality is we take a sample of property within the county and we determine our own taxable value at the Department of Taxation and measure that against the taxable value that the county assessors have determined and see if that they fall within certain different limits. And if we're equal, then that county is determined to be within ratio. If they're unequal, we'll often engage in conversation with the county assessor if we're looking at different things wrong, or if they need to bolster practices in certain areas to make sure that we have equalization among all the different classes of property that are looked at within that ratio study. And so the different classes that we look at are agricultural, commercial, multifamily, single family, and vacant land. Yep, talked through that one. I apologize. I'll pause. This might not be a bad time to just pause for questions. Again, I talk fast through some of these. Is there any general questions over kind of what I've talked through at this point? And I apologize. I should have, Chair, are there any questions from you or the members there? Wonderful. A couple of things to keep in mind when conducting the County Board of Equalization is we are determining and establishing the record on these administrative cases that can be appealed up the chain, for lack of a better term. The first appeal route is to the State Board of Equalization, and then after that, due process does allow these appeals to be petitioned for judicial review up into the Supreme Court. We do have cases that go to the Supreme Court fairly often. There are areas of controversy around property tax that need to be decided by higher courts. We do, on average, I would say between about 3 and 5 PJRs or petition for judicial reviews, and up to the Supreme Court is less often, but once every couple of years. And all those processes start at the County Board of Equalization, or in some cases at the State Board, depending on authority. And so that record is very important to be established on what the motions are, who the petitioner, the respondent is, the due process, and so forth. Rarely at the County Board of Equalization, but occasionally you'll have an intervener. We do see that at the State Board quite often. I'll give an example of a mine property that is appealed. If a mining property that has a significant impact on the assessed value within the county, often the county will elect to become an intervener in that case. And that way they are privy to any of the information and the discussions that are going on at the State Board of Equalization, and they're involved. So we do our best to reach out to the different counties where we have appeals within those counties of mining property, because they are an appeal straight up to the State Board of Equalization. In the identification of properties, it is important to know who is appearing on behalf of the petitioner. Tax representatives or tax agents are able to appear on behalf of somebody. There is an agent authorization form. So the owner of the property or an employee acting within their job scope of that owner of that property can appeal those property taxes. But we need to have that agent authorization form so we know that somebody who has the right to represent that property is actually appealing. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that this involved where tax representatives were filing a multitude of cases, arguing that, and then going to the property owners after the fact and saying, hey, I saved you some property tax, please pay. And not everybody, you need to know what's going on with your own property. And that's where the agent authorization form came into effect. A little bit more about the agent authorization form. If there are questions in regards to the legitimacy of that agent authorization form, there are means outlined within statute, and they're actually on the form itself, where those remedies to those objections to who can represent whoever is on that form. It's fairly rare, but if you come across something in that regards, please don't hesitate to reach out, and we can kind of walk through the process where the petitioner has a couple of days to resolve any issues on that agent authorization form, because we do want to make sure that people have due process and are represented if they wish to be. What if no one shows up? You're allowed to rule, basically, is what this comes down to. Sometimes people will file, they'll submit some evidence, sometimes they won't, and that leaves the county board in a little bit of a flux on what are we supposed to do. We didn't hear in an argument. I will defer to the DA in those cases as he can guide you through, but yes, you're able to make a motion and rule on those different cases. NAC, which is regulation, kind of gives it for the state board. Unfortunately, the regulations don't exist for the county board, but these are the different options that are available to the state board when a party fails to appear. They can proceed with the hearing. Basically, let's look at the evidence, deliberate, and talk about it, or they can dismiss the proceeding with or without prejudice. Or they can recess it and say, let's reach out and see if there's a legitimate reason on why this person was unable to attend. The assessor can't skip. They have to show up. Due process requirements. So we do need to adhere to open meeting law. The agendas have to be properly noticed. Parties have to be properly served. We need to make sure that people are involved in the process. The agenda has to be clear, and there needs to be a notice of action on the item. So occasionally on the equalization hearings, people who do not appeal can be wrapped up in a decision that is determined. And if that's the case, those property owners need to be properly noticed that an action is going to be coming forward of the County Board of Equalization. An example of this would be a property owner comes forward and says, I believe subdivision X is undervalued by 50%. What does the County Board of Equalization do? You can't just raise subdivision X by 50% without supplying those property owners due process and notice where they can come in and explain, talk, understand the process. So what's the purpose of the hearing? One is to make sure that due process occurs. People are being able to heard. You have the different appeals that come forward that you make a motion on. Something that's important as this may be appealed up the chain is we need to construct a record. This falls on the chair in conducting the meeting, that you want to make sure that it doesn't become a shouting match back and forth. There needs to be respect from both parties, but we also strive to construct a model of the events that can occur. So you need to be able to hear the evidence in, as I struggle over the word, a manner which is able to be heard so that you can understand. So you can say, you've made this argument, clarifying questions are allowed to make sure that that record and that argument is made. Evidence does come forward, which can be irrelevant, repetitious, barred by law, and your goal should be to exclude the irrelevant stuff. For example, the value is what is being appealed, but it often boils down to taxes. Taxes isn't part of the discussion. There are avenues and different appeal routes for a property tax appeal if there's an abatement issue or something along those lines. I would recommend not cutting people off, but your review of the evidence when you're making the decision, that's not relevant to the property valuation matter that you are considering and hearing, if that makes sense. Weight of the evidence is defined as relative value, assigned to credible evidence supporting the party's position. It is not quantifiable in the absolute sense. What does that mean? And I'll also talk about that a little bit when I talk about what the burden of proof is. And so when a petitioner is appealing their property value to you, the burden of proof is on them, meaning that it's their job and duty to provide the weight of evidence greater than 51% that their stance is correct. That the evidence that they're presenting to you points to a fact that there's an inequity or full cash value has been exceeded by the taxable value. The burden of proof is on the plaintiff to show by clear and satisfactory evidence that the value established by the county assessor is unjust and inequitable, and that is by statute there. Clear and satisfactory evidence, a fundamentally wrong principle was applied. The board refused to exercise its best judgment, or the assessment was so excessive as to give rise to an implication of fraud or bad faith. Some of these slides I'm just going to read. I apologize. An assessor's valuation is presumed valued, accurate, and correct until overturned by the credible evidence. So some of the questions to ask yourself when you hear a case and when you're reviewing a case. Was the taxable value established appropriately? That is highly regulated by statute and regulation. NRS 361.227 governs it, as well as a lot of different regulations. And the assessor often points that out when they give their evidence in a case. By regulation, we are required to use costing services provided by Marshall and Swift in determination of those valuations. And then with Nevada's property tax system, and I believe the assessor is going to speak to this probably a little bit, is that land values are determined at full cash value. So were they used and developed with comparable cells or with the methodology outlined in regulation to bring those land values as close to full cash as possible. There are different valuation methodologies outside of those. Agricultural property is governed by its own chapter. Property that is valued by the tax commission is not valued with Marshall and Swift. It is a unitary approach to valuation, which is an income approach and then a historic cost less depreciation approach. Personal property is governed by NAC. It is often the acquisition cost and then appropriately depreciated based upon its classification and age. Mining property, that has to be assessed just like the county assessor would do it. And so when the state determines the valuation of mining property, they are constrained by NRS 361-227 and the personal property manual. Emitting and managing exhibits, this falls on the county clerk. Good luck. They should mark and file all the exhibits, provide a clear record, so forth and so on. And that's basically it in a nutshell. I'm available for any questions if you got them.
Okay, anybody have any questions?
Of course I do.
Go for it.
Briefly, and this may lead to a second question depending on your answer, but where in this spectrum do solar fields fall?
That is a very fun question. So centrally assessed property, which is property that is valued by the state, is limited to what is referred to interstate or inter-county in nature, meaning it crosses either state line or county lines. There is an exception to that, to what is referred to as wholesale generators, which have to be locally assessed. And so when looking at a solar field, if it meets a wholesale generator as defined by federal regulation, then it has to be locally assessed, whether or not it crosses county or state lines. A lot of solar fields do fall into that category. There are some that don't, but then they are completely contained within a county. And if that's the case, then they are fully valued by the county assessor as well. What we look at when determining if it's fully contained within the county is solar companies of that magnitude often have what's referred to as a power purchase agreement, and that outlines when that deed to that electricity is transferred. Sometimes it happens at the solar field, sometimes it happens at the substation, sometimes it happens further down the lines. And so there are occasionally solar fields where they do cross and they're not a wholesale generator. Those cases, they would be valued by the state. Doesn't happen very often. I would say 95 to 100% of the, 99.9% of the time, they are valued at the local county level.
Okay, so
Can
that
I add
leads-
to that real quick? We have 3 examples in our county so we have the one that's over on the Lyon County line that crosses county lines, so the state values that one. We have the one that is in Stillwater. It was an Enel plant. Ormat has since bought it. It's attached to the geothermal plant.
That was my next
So
question.
it is assessed centrally assessed because it's attached to the geothermal plant as a mine. And then the solar field that's attached to, or that's south of that, which was an Enel plant, but was purchased also by Ormat, has a power purchase agreement with the Wynn in Vegas, so we locally assess that one.
Okay,
That was too much to listen to.
I'm sorry.
does Nevada is still unique in the way that they tax properties?
I don't have the statistics on the number of states. Most states are fair market value state or a derivative of that, given that they'll do like, you need to be 30% of fair market value or something along those lines. Nevada is not that. We are a cost state, meaning that any improvements to property, especially real property, is valued with Marshall and Swift, replacement cost new, what it would cost to build today, and then it's depreciated upon its age at a state mandated rate, and that's 1.5% a year for 50 years. And so the real property, in my opinion, often falls below what market value is. And we do have that caveat within the appeals that you can't exceed full cash value. And so in those cases, we do kick that down to that full cash value. But many other states use that full cash value as a measure of taxability and assessment. We use it as not to exceed. And so yes, we are very unique in the property tax world.
Why do you think that was developed? Was it that way from the beginning, or did it change 10 years ago, 30 years ago, and why is it that way?
1981 is when it changed. They made a conscious decision at the legislature to shift more from reliance on property taxes to other taxes. Sales and use tax and so forth, rates were increased during that period. It's often referred to as the tax shift, and that's when the law was established to go on this route with, I don't want to speak for him, but I believe the intentionality was to shift the reliance from property taxes onto those other taxes.
And now it's that way. Doesn't the legislature from different years, they try and combat that, and can they take it away and make it go back to pre-81? Is that possible?
So there's been different legislation over the years that have come forward trying to shift Nevada to a fair market value state, or a variety of different proposals have come forward. Removal of the abatement upon sale of the property, removal of the depreciation or a reset of the depreciation upon sale of the property. There's been a variety of different iterations that have come forward. None have progressed to passing law, so we are still at that replacement cost new less state mandated depreciation.
Do you think that is there any correlation, the fact that the way we do our taxes, yet we don't have state income tax? These states that do it the other way, are those the ones that have state income tax? Is that where they're trying to catch and balance, or what's the relationship there?
Some do. Some of our neighboring states, Utah, for example, they are a fair market value state. They give an exemption, I believe, of 45% to anybody who's a primary residence. And so secondary homes are taxed at a lot higher rate in that state, and they also have an income tax in that state. California's property tax system, I do not understand. And so I won't speak to that one, but I know that they have a lot of different propositions and sets and limits and so forth that are in place there. And so Oregon does not have an income tax. They are a fair market value state, but they also have a very complicated abatement structure within that to limit a variety of different valuations. Yeah, I don't know if I'm a good enough expert on all the others, but
Do you find that other states are adopting our way of doing things, or is it going the other way, or is nothing moving?
I don't think that there's been a lot of change. I know that property tax is a hot button item in most legislative sessions in a variety of different states. I don't have a great answer on that one. Sorry.
Okay. All right, that's all I have. Anybody else have questions for our guest? Okay, with that, thank you for making the trip, coming out to see us this year, and we
Thank
certainly
you.
appreciate it.
I appreciate you inviting me out. I hope it happens again. If you're sick of me, I can get somebody else to come on out. But thanks for letting me spend some time with you. And I'm going to excuse myself, if that's okay.
Sure. Thank you. All right. I do want to acknowledge that I believe member Alan Cult has now joined us. Is that correct? So I'll let the record show now that we have full attendance of all of our members. With that, we're going to move on to item B, 6B to be exact, and we're going to talk about some open meeting law and ethics in government, and that's going to be led by our district attorney, Wade Carner.
Thank you. Again, my name's Wade Carner. I'm a deputy district attorney in the civil division. We're going to be going over a real overview of the open meeting law and ethics, and really the portions of the open meeting law that are important for your purposes in this board. NRS 241 is the statute that outlines the open meeting law in Nevada. It's essentially, the gist of that law is that any business that a public body does needs to be open and public. So all of the rules that fall after that are really there to support that idea that everything that a public body does needs to be done in public. So with that, a few definitions here. A gathering of a public body. This group, this board is a public body under the open meeting law, at which a quorum, and a quorum is defined here as well. This is a 5-member board, so a quorum is a simple majority. So if three members of the board are there, that's a quorum. In order to take any action, then at least 3 members need to be present at that meeting. And, excuse me, a simple majority vote of the members present are sufficient to take any action on those items. Actions, so there's 2 different things here that we need to talk about as far as, what needs to be done in public, and there's action and deliberation. And action is pretty simple. It's a decision that's made. In the case of a board such as this, that's when a motion is made and a vote is cast, and one way or the other, the board makes that action. Deliberation is just what it sounds like. It's really a discussion of the issue that's in front of the board at that time. Both of those things need to be done at a public meeting, meaning there can't be a quorum of board members having a discussion about something that the board is taking action on at a later time or later that day. So the deliberation and the action both need to be done in the public meeting. Social gatherings. This is a small community. A lot of times there will be a social gathering where there are a quorum of members present. It's not an open meeting law violation for a quorum to be present at a same social gathering, so long as there's no deliberation or discussion of anything that board is taking action on. My advice has always been for these types of situations is to try to avoid the appearance of something happening. For example, if there are 2 or 3, if there are 3 members, of the board standing over at a social gathering and just talking about nothing to do with what the board is doing, somebody from the public could see that and think that something is going on. So my advice is always to try to avoid even the appearance that there could be some kind of discussion going on outside a public meeting. things to watch for. When the board is meeting, a lot of times there will be breaks or recesses during the meeting. That's a lot of times where open meeting problems can occur, because there can be discussion going on during a break that could be a violation of the open meeting law, because it's not a part of the public meeting when you're on a break. So keep in mind that when you go off the record at a meeting, that the discussion needs to stop until we're back on the record. Rolling quorums or walking quorums, serial communications, I'm not sure what's happening. So serial communications, that would be, for example, if one member would have a discussion with another member, which in a board such as this where there's 5 members, it's not an open meeting law violation for one member to talk to another, because there's no quorum present. But the problem becomes when that member talks to one other member, then talks to a different member, then talks to a different member. It becomes a discussion even though all of the members are not there present at the same time. So, so that's another thing to keep in mind. And again, avoid the appearance of impropriety. That's what I was talking about before. Example of this serial communication or walking quorums, where one person is talking to multiple other members and carrying on a discussion even though they're not all together in the room. The same thing goes for electronic communications, emails, text messages. Those are all types of communications that could be evidence of, or could show that there may have been a serial communication open meeting law violation. So it's not just face-to-face talking or on the phone conversations. It could be emails or text messages or any other way to communicate. Meetings with the attorney do not require public notice, and those meetings do not have to be done in public. However, those meetings are limited to discussion of potential or existing litigation. It's very, very specific as to what those meetings can and can't discuss. And no action can be taken place in those meetings. Notice requirements. Luckily here at the county, we have fantastic staff that take care of a lot of this for us, that get the agendas posted on time and accurately. The notice needs to be posted 3 days before the meeting by 9 a.m. So, for example, if it's a Thursday meeting, it has to post by Monday at 9 a.m. We usually have those a little bit before that. The agenda items have to be specific enough to give the public notice as to what the action item is going to be. And so you can't have an agenda item that just has very general terms that doesn't give the public an idea of what that item actually is. No action can be taken on items unless they are on an agenda and are marked on the agenda for action or for possible action. During the meeting, stick to the agenda. There are times when the chair can move things around. Say, for example, if there's a specific appointment time for somebody, or if there's another reason to take agenda items out of order, the chair can do that. It's best to stick to the agenda because that's what the public sees as to what the schedule is for the meeting, and they may think they can come in a little bit later and catch an agenda item that's further down the agenda. So it's best to stick to the agenda as much as possible. What not to say in a meeting. The idea is that you're coming to that meeting to have a discussion and make a decision on these items. If you're coming to that meeting with your mind made up and you're not going to change your mind, that's up to you. Best to not say that in the meeting, okay? Violations of the open meeting law. So if a violation does occur, the action that was taken in violation of the open meeting law is essentially void. So it has to be reheard at another public meeting time, and it has to be posted that it's corrective action that the board is taking. There are some civil fines that can attach if there's an open meeting law violation. If it's a knowing violation, it is actually a misdemeanor. So my goal is to make sure that doesn't happen to any of you. So that's why I'm here. Public comment. There are requirements for public comment on every public meeting agenda. The legal requirement is once at the beginning of the meeting and once at the end of the meeting, or after each action item is discussed but before action is taken. The best practice is kind of a mixture of both of those things, to have a general public comment section at the beginning of the meeting, then also ask for public comments before action is taken on any action item during the agenda, and then again at the end of the meeting for general public comment. Public comment, the general public comment sections can be really about anything on or off the agenda. Cannot limit people's public comment based on the content or what they're saying. You can limit the time. Typically, like for county commission meetings, we limit people to 3 minutes per person, and to stick to those time limits. Because if you grant, say, one person an extra minute for their public comment and then try to limit the next person, that could be a violation. So everyone should get a uniform amount of time to give their public comments. And board members should avoid making public comment in those sections, because you have the opportunity to get your discussion on the record during each agenda action item. The chair is responsible for conducting the meeting, making sure that the agenda is followed and flows, calling for motions and voting, and yeah, we've covered all that already. If there are disruptive people, the chair can order that they be removed from the meeting. The best practice is to admonish them, give them the opportunity to stay in the meeting. If they continue to be disruptive, to then have them removed. Moving on to the ethics portion of this. General rule, do not participate in any agenda item or matter before the board that you're on that you have a personal interest in. And there's a few different parts of that. You should not really even discuss, comment on, vote on any item that you have accepted a gift or loan from somebody. If you have an economic interest in that item or the people involved in that item, or if the people involved in that you have what they call a commitment in a private capacity. Essentially, that means family members. And if that is true, if that's the case, disclose that situation on the record and just make it clear that you're abstaining from any vote on that item or any discussion of that item. If there's a question about it, come to me beforehand. We can talk about it, and when in doubt, disclose it, and you're covered. And so here's commitment in a private capacity, but what this can mean. It's someone in your household, a family member, your boss, somebody you have a business relationship with, or substantially similar relationship. That leaves it open to some interpretation, but typically you'll know if you have a commitment in a private capacity to somebody. And if there's a question about it, again, come to me and we can discuss it. So this is just a chart that the Nevada Commission on Ethics has put out as far as how far down the family tree you have to go before you make a disclosure about something that could affect you as far as the Ethics Commission goes. And so these boxes in red are the family members that you would need to be concerned about making a disclosure on. Other ethical rules to keep in mind: don't accept gifts, services, favors from anybody that are involved in the business that you're doing here with the board. Don't use your position on this board to get any privileges or anything like that. Don't use any information you learned for your own personal gain, and not to use any government time, equipment, or property for any of your personal use. You can, if you have a question about a certain situation, you can request an opinion from the Nevada Commission on Ethics, and they will provide an opinion to you on your specific situation, and that is a confidential advisory opinion just for you. And again, this is just another reminder that all of the business that's done in any public body is to be open and available to the public, and that we keep that in mind. So if you have any questions, I believe that's all that I have.
Questions, comments?
Okay.
Wade, one thing you said was during the public comment section, the board should refrain from making public comments.
Correct.
Expand on that a little bit. So, just as if anything that's off the record or off the agenda or something?
Yeah, typically the agenda is built in a way that anything that the board would want to discuss, normally there's an item there that says, board announcements or board
Okay.
or requests for future agenda items, things like that, where the board has that opportunity to make their comments. And then for the items that are on the agenda, the board obviously has their opportunity to make, their comments made during those individual action items. So the public comment period is really there reserved for the public to come in and make their comments.
Another thing I've noticed, whether it's be on a school board or a county commission or what have you, when there's public comments, that public commenter is asking the board something, to do something, and they continually sit there and don't respond.
Yes.
Is that how that's supposed to go?
Yes, typically and there should be, a lot of times for our agendas, we'll have something for the chair to read that actually says that, this can be discussion on items on or off the agenda. There will be no discussion amongst the board members related to the public comment. It's not a dialogue, essentially. It's the public coming there, making their comments. The board is not there to have that discussion with them because those items are not on an agenda, right? So it's not something to sit and have a dialogue with the public on at that point. It's really there. And if it's something that a public commenter brings up that the board says, wow, that's something we should really talk about, then it can go on a future agenda for the board to discuss.
I think sometimes the general public, they don't know that. And
Right.
they'll come and say something, and they want someone to say something back, and they don't, and then they leave disgruntled
Right,
because they'll say, well, the board just sat there.
right.
So I guess it's up to the board to say, we can't comment, but we'll talk about a future agenda or something like that.
Right, and the chair can say that during public comment. Just let them know, we're not here to have a discussion on this, but if it's something that we want to have, on a future agenda, we can look at that.
Okay. All righty. Anybody else? Okay, thank you very much. Our next item is item 6C. It's a presentation for real and personal property, and this will be led by, looks like our big team from the Churchill County Assessor's Office. We got a lot of them here today.
So good afternoon, board members. Denise Felton, Churchill County Assessor for the record. Thank you for taking the time to be here today. I have my Chief Deputy Assessor, Leslie Notestein, here with me. I also have the group of my staff here, Heather Gomes, Reagan Tecker, Willow Timbrell, Morgan Lamont, and Teresa Wilson was there a moment ago. So today we've prepared an overview of assessment for you. Jeff did touch on some things, but if we're going to kind of go back over them. But if you guys have any questions or want to go more in depth on a topic, let me know as we go along. So let me turn this to the next one. So in Nevada, we have two tax rolls, the secure tax roll and the unsecured tax roll. Both tax rolls contain the same elements: land, structures, personal property, exempt value, which is typically your land and your structures. And then it could also be personal property in certain instances, and personal exemptions. So we value the secured roll for the future fiscal year. So again, that's where those budgets come into play. The current secured year is 2026 and 2027. Since the secured roll is tied to the real property, its values are more stable than the unsecured roll. So again, that's why they heavily rely on those values for budgeting purposes. The secured tax roll consists of land and structures affixed to the land, personal property. Sometimes it could be a business equipment, but mostly it's manufactured homes. NRS 361-450 also does say that if you own personal property in the state, the lien actually for the personal property goes with the real property if you own it. So as an assessor, if I have an outstanding unsecured tax bill, I can actually attach it to somebody's house in another county. Exempt value, the assessor's office appraises all property, taxable and exempt. So we value the schools, this building. So we put values on the tax roll for reporting purposes. So we assess all of it, even if it's exempt. Personal exemptions that are defined by 361. These are eligible surviving spouses, veterans, disabled veterans, and blind individuals. NEC and NRS chapters 361 pertain to appraising property for tax purposes. NRS 361.227 summarizes how we determine taxable values for real property. We value land at market, which is the full cash value. If vacant, we use the parcel value according to its highest and best use. If the parcel is improved, we value it according to current use. To value all structures, we use Marshall and Swift costing service to determine the replacement cost new. And just to add on that, Marshall and Swift is used extensively also by insurance companies. So we're valuing it similar to what maybe your insurance company would value to replace the structure if it was damaged. And then we applied that 1.5% depreciation for up to 50 years. So structures that are 50 years old and older are taxed at that 25% residual value of its replacement cost. And so that's where Jeff was saying that we are below market, especially on your older homes. We're undervaluing those because they're valued at that residual, not what they currently might be worth.
So you don't make any adjustment for effective age as opposed to chronological
Nope.
age? Okay.
So that's always a huge discussion is making that effective age adjustment like the appraisers do, but there's nothing in statute for us to bring that value up to what the market is. It's just pure cost.
So that's the big beef.
That could
with
be.
many people, because if you have a 50-year-old house and a brand-new house, and they're both at $500,000, somebody's paying less tax.
Now, if they do like a major remodel or something like that, we do go in and do a an adjustment for that. If there's a major remodel, but if they're going through time and they're doing that deferred maintenance, we typically don't make an adjustment for that. There's nothing for us to do. But like I said, if they do a major remodel and replace a lot of we do what we call a percent complete, determine how much of the structure was replaced, and we make an adjustment for that. But or a fire would be another example of that.
So that really goes to effective age then, just in a roundabout way.
In around, like I said, if there was a major remodel or a fire, but not for things that people do over time, we don't make that
So
adjustment.
you document that how?
I'll let Leslie answer that.
Leslie Notestein, Chief Deputy Assessor for the record. So typically how we document that is upon discovery, and we have many methods of discovery. It could be a listing, it could be the owner themselves reporting something that's happened. It could be actually a building permit that they've taken out for a remodel. We will go through and we will inspect the property, figure out all the components that have been replaced, things like drywall, fixtures, electrical. We have a Marshall and Swift percent complete worksheet we go through and figure out exactly how much of that house has been redone. And then we do a weighted year based on that percentage. And then the difference of that is then marked as new construction, so it comes outside of that tax cap for that year. And it inflates the taxes a little bit because it's new construction. But then that goes in our record as new construction for that remodel. So that's how we kind of document all of that.
So let's expand on that just a little bit more. So a house is 50 years old, and the maintenance has been normal all the way through, and so that house is very livable at 50. So now we're up to year 55, 56. Those taxes are just going to keep hitting the same every year then at that 25.
So it basically, that property or house is recost with the new costs, but then it's depreciated back down to that 25% residual. And then that's where that 3% increase every year. So essentially your values, and if to talk taxes, they more correlate with what you paid in taxes last year than it does the assessed value of the property.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Okay. This keeps vibrating, so I'm not sure if the battery's going in it. Oh, it's working so far. Okay, so I'm sorry. The secure tax roll is valued by certified appraisers who value the property without relying on property owner feedback. So our appraisers go out, they measure it, they determine the class, and so it's a little different from the unsecured roll. And of course, they have to be certified to do that. And then the new fiscal year begins on the lien date, July 1st, and NRS 361-300 requires the assessor to complete the valuation process annually by December 18th. The assessor must send a notice of assessment value to each taxable parcel in the county. So that's what kind of triggers the whole process. We have to complete as much of the work as possible by that December 18th. We send the notices out to give the taxpayers the opportunity to bring things to our attention or to appeal their values. So what do we do when a taxpayer has a question? So we actually monitor the market daily through listings and sales. So if somebody comes in, we review the appraisal in depth with the owner. We visit the property to ensure the most accurate and up-to-date appraisal has been done. We complete a paired sales analysis and review any evidence provided by the taxpayer. So NRS 361.227 allows the assessor to also use alternative methods, such as the income approach, if necessary. So the unsecured roll follows the fiscal year behind the secured roll and corresponds with the collection year. So the current unsecured year, tax roll year is 25-26. So it's more of in real time and not in the future. So an example of land on the land valued on the unsecured roll would be a geothermal plant. For example, if the facility was located on a BLM parcel, BLM is exempt from taxes, but the land utilized by the facility would be subject to possessory interest taxes. So we would assess the geothermal plant for the property used by the facility as if they owned it.
I'm going to ask a question.
Sure.
Loaded question.
Sure.
Grazing permits are often, due to some Supreme Court cases, considered a possessory interest in public lands. Do you value those at all, or not?
So that's a whole other story. So it's hard to get some of that information. Like even from the Navy base, I had somebody who used to give me that information. Then he retired, and I've done a Freedom of Information Act request trying to get that information on who has the leases. And sometimes that information is really hard to obtain. But if we do get that information, then we do assess the people for a possessory interest on that.
So those are leases that, like the actual BLM grazing permits or Forest Service grazing permits is what I'm referring to.
The forest serving grazing permits, I believe Forest Service land, there is an exemption for that. It's something different, and I don't have that statute right
I'm
off the
just
top of my
curious.
head. But I believe the forest land, there's a different exemption for that. But like I said, the Navy ones we used to do, and then we lost our contacts, so we haven't been able to get some of that information from the Navy. Yes. So let's see. Personal property, the most personal property is valued on this tax roll. Manufactured homes, business equipment, aircraft hangars, and telecommunications equipment. Exempt value, the only exempt value we actually value on the unsecured roll is CC Communications, and we only do that for reporting purposes. A personal exemption can be applied to the unsecured roll as well. An example of that is somebody can apply it towards their manufactured home in a park and to offset the taxes for that. So property that's not affixed to real property, or for property that is owned by someone other than the owner of the real property, is also valued on the unsecured roll. That possessory interest is an example. Most property on the unsecured roll is not secured to the parcel by ownership, so the only way to collect unpaid taxes is to seize or lock up enough property to satisfy the unpaid debt. So that's why it's unsecured. Personal property is declared via a written statement. And so annually, we send out declarations where all personal property within the county that is owned, claimed, possessed, controlled, or managed by those persons, firms, corporations, associations, or companies. So that is up to the taxpayer to provide us with that information. So it's a little bit harder to do because we don't just go out and pick it up as our appraisers. Since it's equipment, we rely on that information from the taxpayer for the most part. So what do we need to value that? We need a description of that taxable property, enough that we can make a determination of what it is. We need the acquisition cost of each item and the year that it was acquired. The chapter makes provisions for the assessor to value property if a property owner does not cooperate. So we send out the declarations typically at the end of June. They're due back by the end of July. If we send out a declaration at any other time frame, they're due back 15 days after request. But if someone, and like the statute that says if they deny us access to their property, we can make an estimate, the secured roll also has a caveat for that. So if someone fails to provide a written statement as described in subsection 1, the county assessor shall make an estimate of value of the property and assess it accordingly. Oh, go back one. So unlike the secured roll where we have to send notice, the unsecured roll, the tax bill is the notice. So, and it's collected in that same year. So instead of sending out assessment notice saying you're going to be billed in July, here's your values. When we finish up the unsecured roll, we send a bill, and that is the notice of valuation. So how do we come up with an estimate? So we use a tool, what's called CAVS. It is the Cost Analyst Valuation System. Initially, it was through a company called Tax Management Associates, but they split it into the two portions of the business. One is the auditing portion, and the second one is the software that does the estimates. So with the tool, it helps us understand what assets are owned by which businesses, how much those assets are worth. Their business models are based on industry research and experience. Assets are valued across multiple sections. Their algorithm increases the appropriate values based on the number of employees. The CAVS application gives local government access to consistent business models. So how we use this is when we have new businesses and we set up a new account, we send out a new business letter that says you're going to be getting information from us. And a lot of times based on their business license, we actually will send an estimate of value and say this is what we're looking for when you have to declare the personal property. So how we use the software, you log in and it uses the NAICS codes. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with what a NAICS code is. It's a national, it used to be called the SIC code a long time ago, but now they call them NAICS. It's an industry coding system that most businesses use for reporting purposes. And we also report our personal property based on the NAICS code as well. So we create an account, we put that NAICS code in there so it can fall in to our reporting for the values. So we use the NAICS code to determine what kind of business it is, and then we can scale it up and down by the number of employees. Also with social media nowadays, a lot of people will put a lot of that information out on the website about their websites or social media about what their business is, what they have, pictures and so on and so forth. So we use those to kind of get an idea of what we're looking for without, necessarily going out there to send the estimates. And so this is what an estimate looks like. Like I said, we send this out initially with the new business, and then if we have non-filers, we send demand letters and say, okay, if you don't get back to us, these are those types of business assets that we're expecting to see, and this is what we could estimate on your property. And then again, Jeff went over to the power to change. We do have an appeal from both the secured and the unsecured tax roll this year, so you guys can get some experience on both of those. And there is a caveat as far as that goes. If someone fails to give us access to the property, or if they failed to give us a declaration and work with us as far as their personal property goes, we can make an estimate there, and then the board can hear the case, but they can't make a change in the value because it was done as an estimate. And then the burden of proof is on the taxpayer to prove that we're either exceeding or it's an equalization issue. We were going to do a market update but I can let Leslie explain what happened there.
I know in the past, everybody's kind of enjoyed our little statistics. Unfortunately, because of a Microsoft error, I am not able to query any of our sales out of our database. So I'm sorry, we'll have to wait till next year.
Happy to answer any questions you may have.
I have one. And that's more specific, but I was asked this question and I didn't have the answer. Ag properties fall under the Greenbelt exemption if they have properly filed. Is there any consideration, excuse me, any consideration in the land value for the now ton of conservation easements that this county has on irrigated properties?
So agriculturally assessed is, we assess those properties pursuant to 361A of Nevada law. And so what those are is we're using a preferred value to value those agricultural properties. Those TDRs, that's a county program. And so what we do with those is we actually have a land characteristics where we keep track of those. But it doesn't really come into play as far as valuation for us, because if it's an ag, we're actually using that state classification and we're not using the market side of that, if that makes sense.
So the state, the state makes no allowance for a conservation easement?
No.
Okay.
Other questions? I don't know if you know this or not, but what percentage does property taxes contribute to the overall income or, of the county every year?
I think that
About
changes.
30, this is Alan,
Oh, it's
about
Alan.
32% of the general fund for Churchill County. Lyon
Yes, God.
County, whoops, sorry, Lyon County is slightly less. Humboldt County, it's like 34%.
Okay. And then,
Um,
go ahead, Alan.
You know, I have another question or comment. And Denise, correct me if I'm wrong, but the role of the Board of Equalization is valuation, not the level of taxes. Because a lot of these questions that were asked, it kind of appear to me that you're focused on what the taxpayer pays on their tax liability. And I always thought the boards of equalization was to determine if the correct valuation of the property, be the land and the improvements or the personal property, is adequate, not the number of dollars that they have to pay the clerk treasurer to pay taxes on. Is that correct?
You are correct. Yep.
Okay,
And
thank
then
you.
if you want to appeal your taxes for one reason or the other, I believe the tax commission is the authority for taxes themselves, and that would be an exemption or abatements and that type of thing. I believe that the authority for that is the Nevada Tax Commission. Because once the value leaves the assessor's office, that goes to the treasurer's office, and then, like I said, there's a different avenue for that.
Another question I have, just because I'm curious, Connex boxes. Those seem to be, there's more and more, and those are personal property. People are using them for storage sheds or storage buildings, or maybe even, I don't know, a garage or something. Those have value. Are they keeping track of those?
So typically what we do for commercial businesses, that would be something they would declare on their personal property declaration as part of business equipment. When they're on residential properties, we cost them as a prefabricated shed. They're using them for storage, something of that sort. So we actually cost them through Marshall and Swift as a prefabricated shed. So we do track them. They're everywhere.
Okay, other questions and comments? Okay. And then this next month, did you say we have one secured and one unsecured?
Yes.
And can the list grow or go down, or?
No, it's closed.
It's closed.
Yeah, the deadline to appeal is passed. So
Okay.
that's what we have.
Okay, thank you. Thank you guys for all your work you guys do over there. We appreciate it. Okay. All right, we are now at item 7, and item 7 is public comment. Does anybody have any public comment? And hearing none, we are going to go ahead and adjourn this meeting of the Board of Equalization. So we're adjourned.